Chapter 113, Winter. 6 months had passed since I left Lyra in the care of a lunatic, and yes, I was counting the days. Well, the weeks, to be precise. 26, I muttered, watching the snow bury Velgrada as it had kept falling for the past 2 weeks. The weather was horrible, as wind made the falling snow come at you sideways, hurled around between the streets strong enough to rattle windows and tear poorly nailed signs off before some of the storefronts we now owned. It made me think about how Brannick's rickety home was holding up. But I held back from visiting. I promised Lyra, and I knew myself that if I went near that house, I might change my mind about letting her stay there. I just hoped it was doing better than some of the roofs our businesses had, because they had to be cleared every few days before the weight of the snow collapsed them. And I am talking about places we now own, as I wasn't sitting still, only watching the days pass. I threw myself into work, and we were expanding, spending money the same way we were earning it. However, it was the proper choice, because only with money can you make more money. I was watching the swirling snow from the third-floor window of my office, my eyes fixed on a carriage, its wheels struggling through the churned slush on the cobblestone before it stopped beneath our now-covered entrance. Our newly hired servants hurried out with umbrellas, cloaks, and warmed covers, while nobles and merchants rushed inside, coming to spend money even in this weather. Or maybe because of it, because sitting inside here was better than being bored to death at home. Even then, even when we were running day and night, the Swan's revenue had finally stopped growing. Saying it out loud sounded bad only until you looked at the numbers and realized how much money we were making. There is a level that is a plateau, and we finally hit it, and that was fine. At least it made things more predictable. Also, other people had attempted to copy us, of course. The first imitation of my casino appeared less than 2 months after the Swan opened. A local merchant converted one of his taverns, bought several tables from Marcus, even copied our cards, and hired a handful of pretty women to serve drinks. It lasted, about 3 weeks. I didn't really pay attention to it. The second attempt had more money behind it and lasted nearly a month. After those 2, the third never even properly opened, and I hadn't threatened any of them. I hadn't even sabotaged their supplies or bribed their workers, or, although he asked for it, sent Kravik to explain the dangers of unhealthy competition. There was simply no need for any of that. They copied without understanding the business I had built around it. They had no reliable security, no trained dealers, no private rooms, and most of all, no reputation powerful enough to convince the wealthy to choose them over us. Especially because cheating got really bad at those places, while here I had a firm grip over it and made sure everyone knew that we were fair. Well, as fair as one can be, but those are useless details that nobody needs to know besides me. Not to mention, psychology was doing its thing, and people went where people already were. We were proven and trusted, and that was our biggest weapon, as the Swan had become that place. "Come in," I said, when a loud knock on my door made my thoughts come back to the present, and I turned away from the window, watching Puck poke his head in. He had grown noticeably over the past 6 months, and although he was still thin, he was no longer looking like a street urchin. His uniform fit him properly, his hair was clean, and the boy looked respectable, or more like a little gigolo in the making, with how he was charming all the wives of the gambling nobles visiting the Swan. "Boss," he said quickly, "Kravik says the others are waiting downstairs." "Which downstairs?" "Heh," Puck grinned. "The real one." "I'm coming." I chuckled as I pulled myself up the chair and collected the papers on my desk that I wanted my people to go over. Most were detailing the latest revenue numbers, but a few were reports from businesses that officially had nothing to do with me. Officially. But off the record, I now owned a bathhouse, an inn frequented by the city and caravan guards, a pawn shop in the market square, 2 low-life drinking houses if I needed disposable killers, and an official courier office working with the city's middle class. Of course, if you looked up their owners on the signed and stamped papers, each belonged to someone different. Most of them were people I had never met and never would. The venues were managed by our newer recruits, who were recruited not by the Swan but by Shade's agents, none of whom knew more than necessary. They were getting their orders through the kids, giving them coded notes, and I made sure each of them knew nothing of the others. They were operating in isolated cells, only telling them as much as needed while they gathered rumors and information in exchange for coin. The arrangement was deliberately convoluted because even if one location was exposed, it would lead to another false identity, then to a paid messenger or anywhere that can't be traced back to me. Nothing could be pointed toward the Swan. That was my main rule. Also, the biggest new thing was that by now we had a cellar that had been expanded twice. We purchased the two neighboring properties through separate buyers, allowing Veron's workers to connect their foundations to ours. No individual crew had been shown the complete layout, and they were never told what they were doing. They were connecting those buildings' underground spaces to ours. We gave them the easiest lie, that they were constructing private wine cellars for wealthy investors. The moment they heard the posh-sounding excuse, they stopped asking questions, especially when the pay was so good. As for how to get there from the Swan, the hidden entrance was concealed behind one of the actual wine racks I had. You had to turn 3 bottles in the correct order to release a lock, allowing the entire rack to slide aside and show you the stairs leading down. Heading there, Puck slipped through the opening first, while I followed him with a smile. There was a meeting chamber down here, several offices, an archive, a lounge, and a training hall large enough to qualify as any kind of dojo I remembered seeing in movies. It was not all. There was a second level that was more heavily protected, because that was where we kept our main vault with our reserve money and documents on all the dirt we had on people. Oh, and all the emergency supplies I was starting to hoard. Then there was an armory too, because I began buying weapons and potions, preparing for the worst. As for the vault itself, it had 3 separate locks. Kravik held one key, I held another, and I put Lyra's key aside for now. Also, the final mechanism to open it required a numeric combination that only I knew. Naturally, that was not all, because with the sprawling underground space, we also had an elongated common room, complete with a fireplace, couches, a kitchen, and a game room for the kids. I made sure we had private corridors branching off the common room, leading to individual bedrooms for Kravik, Rian, Hadric, Siren, Ilya, Puck, Mira, and the other children who had remained with us. Naturally, they didn't all need to live underground. I gave them enough salary to buy any home they liked in the city, but to my surprise, they mostly stayed here. After what most of them had experienced, knowing there were layers of stone, locked doors, armed guards, and an entire casino between them and the streets helped them sleep. Especially Mira, but we never really talked about it anymore, and that was fine with me. I even ordered a massive bathroom with heated water, which had cost an obscene amount to make a reality, but I could afford it, so I let them enjoy it. But it was co-ed, so they had to schedule who had it and when. Plus, at the far end of it all, there was a separate living area built especially for Lyra and me, along with a future potion-making laboratory. Too bad she had never seen any of it yet. Finally, Hadric called when I entered the common room. I was working. I shot him a glare, but I was smiling. You were brooding, Siren added, sitting in one of the recliners. Boss, you should go check on your wife. We all can see your mind is constantly on the issue. I was thinking, and let's not discuss what. I waved a hand, but they weren't letting it go. Brooding, no question about it, Ilya added, nodding at her rat who sat on her lap, wrapped in a tiny strip of wool, while it also squeaked at me. You too? I asked, shrugging. Are you this confident in teasing your boss? Duh, you are too lax, Kravik chuckled while he occupied the largest chair, with one boot resting on the edge of the table in the middle. Rayan sat near him with a mug in hand, although the smell told me it contained something akin to tea instead of anything hard. Hadric was shuffling a deck of cards absent-mindedly, so lost in thought he didn't even notice the commotion, while Mira and Puck had taken the warmest section near the fireplace. All right, I said, clapping, making Hadric flinch while I was taking my seat at the head of the table. Let's begin. Most of the meeting involved routine matters, discussing our revenue, whether we needed more security and potential new recruits. We talked about how Ivessa had stabilized the ledger faster than we expected. Our alliance had benefited both sides, and now we were using what the ledger possessed. All their established routes, contacts outside of the city, and their smuggling warehouses as I was slowly probing the world, seeing if we could expand or not. For the past month, we have been preparing to open a second Gilded Swan in another city. That was my main order, my main focus. I wanted a branch establishment before they got the idea to make their own. Or more than one, depending on how many of the free cities we can worm ourselves into. The first building had already been selected, and negotiations with the local lords were underway. Ivessa would handle the existing interests and transportation routes, while I would provide the games, trained staff, machines, capital, and branding. I was probably introducing the idea of franchising into this world. Anyway, if it succeeded, the Swan would no longer belong only to Velgrada, and it would double or triple our fame, along with placing more ears everywhere for me. And money. Yes, that would start flowing in too. Ivessa wants an answer about the ownership split, Siren said, sliding a letter toward me. She accepted your other conditions. That is the only part where she is trying to gain a bit more than stated. 65 to us, 35 to the ledger, I said without opening the letter, while Siren just shrugged. She asked for 40. She can ask, Kravik laughed. She won't get it. I'll write the response, Siren said, seeing I wasn't arguing, and when she spoke that, I just smiled at her. Politely. How politely? She asked again, watching my smile grow. Let's say, enough that she knows I respect her, but make it firm. I want to make sure that she remembers who is the one who can make it happen. When the rest was done, it should have been the end of the meeting. But Rian cleared his throat, looking around, making me raise a brow because he looked nervous. What? I asked, feeling that bad news was coming, especially when he glanced at Hadrik, who had suddenly become fascinated by his cards once again. Just say it. I shrugged, rubbing my face. I can take bad news. I am not the type who yells at you, am I? Well, Rian began, rubbing his jaw, there is one other matter. There isn't, Ilya said immediately, now making me confused. I haven't even said anything, Rian argued. You were talking about it earlier. Siren joined in. Both you and Hadrik should drop it. What? I asked, though the sudden discomfort around the table gave me a reasonable idea of what was going on, since this wasn't the first time it had come up. Boss, Hadrik sighed, before anyone becomes angry, this comes from a place of concern. I told him not to bring it up, Kravik muttered, also realizing what was about to be said. No, you said you weren't getting involved, Rian argued, yet you were nodding your head all the way, from start to finish. Which means don't bring it up while I'm in the room. Kravik raised his hands, avoiding my gaze while I leaned back, tapping on the table. Just say it already. Hadrik stopped shuffling his deck, gulping, Boss, it has been 6 months. And? I asked after he stopped speaking. And Brannick said a few months. Hadrik continued very, very carefully. 6 is more than a few. He said until she was ready. I shrugged, shaking my head. I know, we all know. Rian tried to help, lifting both hands. But perhaps you should check. No visitations. You own enough people in this city to check without visiting. Kravik also added, clearly agreeing with the two, and that was when Ilya slammed her palm against the table. He does not own people. You know what I meant? Kravik snorted, rolling his remaining eye. We're not saying anything happened, Hadrik added again. It's just a long time. She is staying somewhere else, maybe meeting people Auriel doesn't know, doing things none of us see. There wasn't even a letter or something. You know? Anything? She is learning alchemy, Siren said coldly, looking at him. That's all that is happening. Probably, Hadrik replied, avoiding her eyes. She is not like you boys, Siren argued, her eyes narrowing. So, choose your next word carefully. Boss. Hadrik looked at me instead. I am only saying that people change when they are separated. Sometimes they find a different life. Or someone else, Rian whispered, but just as the room fell silent, it was heard by everyone. You should at least make sure, he said in a hurry, not only is she alive, but, that she is still yours. Enough. Ilya stood so abruptly that her chair behind her fell over. Lyra is not a piece of property, and most of all, she is not a cheater. That isn't what I meant. Then what else did you mean? Ilya snapped at him. You think she disappears into an old man's workshop for a few months and suddenly forgets him, right after all they went through? You should be whipped, all 3 of you. No, Rien said. But there is no but, Siren interrupted. Unlike Ilya, she didn't raise her voice, but she was just as angry. There should be simply nothing to be said. While they were arguing, I watched the kids who were trying to not be seen, disliking the topic more than anything. Sensing their feelings too, Hadrick exhaled, shaking his head. We aren't saying that. She did. Okay, I raised a hand before the argument could continue. That's enough. Everyone stopped as I looked first at Rian, then Hadrick, finally throwing a quick look at Kravik. I understand why you brought it up. I will not spy on Lyra, nor will I send someone to watch Brannick's house. I will not break the agreement because the apprenticeship lasted longer than we expected. What if it lasts a year? Rian asked. Then I'll reconsider whether Brannick is actually teaching her or using her as unpaid labor. I snorted. But none of us knows jack shit about alchemy, so let's be patient. Lyra is smart enough. If she realizes that the old man is using her, she would have already left. Understood, boss, they all said, and Rayan and Hadrick quickly added in unison, I meant no disrespect. I know, I smiled to reassure them, and the meeting ended soon after. One by one, everyone returned to their duties or rooms until only Kravik and I remained. He didn't speak at first. In the end, standing, I walked toward the private corridor, and he followed me without needing an invitation. We entered the sitting room meant for Lyra and me, and I closed the door behind us. While he went to retrieve a wine bottle, I sank into one of the two cushioned chairs facing another fireplace. You handled that well, he said, handing me a cup, sitting into the other. They meant well. I shrugged. So? He asked, taking a sip. So what? Boss, come on. Isn't it obvious? For a few moments, I watched sparks rise through the flames before taking a sip. Sometimes, I admitted, I think about it. It usually happens at night, I continued after a short pause. Or when Brannick sends another note saying she needs more time. I start wondering what she is really doing. Who is she speaking to? Whether she misses me as much as I miss her. I know it is stupid, I shrugged, shaking my head. It isn't. It is when there is no evidence. I glanced at him from the corner of my eye. That doesn't make the fear unreal, boss. In my previous life, I had spent my best years and more with someone I thought would remain by my side forever. Yet, it turned out as it did, ending with me lying on the floor, dying. I gave her everything, while I had ignored all of the red flags until there was nothing to do about it. Was I doing the same thing now? That was my biggest fear, and I was starting to feel paranoid. It wasn't a good feeling, and I was trying to avoid thinking about it. My experience tells me that the delay means something is going wrong, I said suddenly, the words coming out without filters. I just don't know why or what. She isn't. Like the woman we are thinking of when you all try to warn me. I appreciate it really, but Lyra has never given me a reason to think she is like that. She chose me when choosing me was dangerous and stupid. Hell, she didn't even think about coming with me when I had nothing to provide her with. I know, Kravik said with a small chuckle. That was very stupid from both of you. I should say, but you survived while look what happened to us. So, in my opinion, you both did the right thing. He chortled, but then added, however, basically it was very stupid. Very. I agreed with my own chortle. The final thing is, I believe in her. Completely? No, I answered after a short pause, because I was hurt before and that damned memory keeps prodding me in the back. But I am doing my best to ignore it. I'm just telling you because it feels relieving to be honest about it. Don't worry, I'm taking it into the grave. Thanks, I whispered as I looked toward the closed bedroom door. I want to knock Brannick's door down, walk inside, pick her up and bring her home. We could do that, just say the word. Huh. I shook my head, turning away from the door. But if I do that because I am afraid she might leave me, then I become another person, deciding what she is allowed to do. So, I will wait and see what happens. I need to keep to my principles. I shrugged, downing the rest of my drink. If I want to be a man, I should at least have some of that, don't I? Chapter 114. Visitors. A few days later, naturally, it was still snowing. People had given up trying to clear every street properly, focusing instead on cutting narrow pathways through the accumulated snow. I couldn't let that happen to us, so before the Swan, there were always 20 to 30 people shoveling the streets leading towards my casino. I didn't care who was doing the shoveling, just get it done. I paid them to do it well, and there were no complaints, quite the opposite. As I caught that someone was praying, the snow never stopped falling. It had also earned me more goodwill than expected, as all the nearby businesses on the route to my casino benefited from it. "Stop touching it," I muttered, looking away from the cleaning crew running around with shovels outside. "I am not touching anything," Kravik answered me as he was standing behind me. "Can't believe you still have trouble with ties," I chortled while tying my own tie. "We look like a noble," Kravik muttered, grimacing. "It will forever be weird for me. And if you want to deal with them, you have to join them. Still, I know how they work, so even if they won't say, they will never really look at us as one of them." "Then why bother?" He snorted, making me shake my head, turning away from the glass and adjusting my coat. "Because I need this to be done." "Capiche?" I asked, raising a hand, making a pinching gesture, watching as he looked at me, dumbfounded. "Boss, whenever you make that voice and act, I still don't know who you are trying to mimic." "Doesn't matter," I shrugged, nodding with my head to follow me. "Just bear with everything, because even if they think we are upstart fake idiots, they still want our money and a hand in our profit jars, so they will tolerate us." "Isn't that dangerous?" "Could be," I nodded, "but that's why we will find all the dirt on them in the meantime and make them our bitch. Their confidence in being superior will be their downfall. As for why we were talking about this, it was because the people coming to visit today were here for us." "Are the others ready?" I asked, changing the topic, walking up from below, entering the main floor. "Siren has been fussing around for an hour," he answered. "Hadric and Rayan are checking the private floor, while Ilya is inspecting the surrounding areas with the dogs and whatever else she tamed." Just then, I noticed Siren hurrying up to me, carrying a leather folder against her chest. She wore a dark blue dress and a fur-lined cloak, and unlike Kravik, she looked entirely comfortable in formal clothes. "Ivessa has already arrived," she said at once. "She just got let in, and she brought 6 people." "Armed?" Kravik asked. "Obviously." She shot her a glance. "Concealed, but yeah. Take it from them." I shrugged, shaking my head. "She knows my rules. If anyone complains, tell them to leave." "We already did." Siren nodded with a soft smile before handing me the folder. "These are the final reports on the delegation, boss." "Thanks." I took it as I opened it and skimmed the first few pages. The delegation we were expecting came from Keldora, another of the 7 cities, and hopefully the future location of our second Gilded Swan. The city itself was built at the joining of 2 rivers, making it one of the federations, of which Velgrada was one of the 7 cities making it up, most important inland trade centers. As far as I heard, its roads were busier than Velgrada's, even though its population was only half ours, and also it was connected to us. All the splintered rivers that run through here, making the canals, were offshoots from their joined one, so it was easy to sail up and down between the cities. That's why I need a foothold there first and foremost, not only for the money's sake, but the cache of information waiting to be taken. What was surprising was that, unlike Velgrada, Keldora was not governed by one city lord. Instead, it had a council of 9. 3 seats belonged to the oldest noble houses who established the city, 3 to the currently wealthiest merchant families, and 3 to the largest guilds within their territory. The hotbed of corruption, if you ask me. Perfect. I didn't need to convince an entire city if they were set up like this. I only needed to get 5 councillors on my side, and it was smooth sailing. As a famous man once said, "I love democracy." Of course, I wasn't going to simply offer money. That wouldn't work. People like these valued things differently if their coffers were always full. So my plan was to offer a construction contract here and there, give them supply agreements I had picked up, or make promises to invest in a certain part of the city. Things like that. "Anything new?" I asked while looking over the rest of the document. "One thing only." Siren pointed toward the 4th profile. Magistrate Renner requested to join the delegation at the last moment. Renner? I looked down at the charcoal sketch. He was a lizard-faced man, maybe in his early 50s, with closely cropped hair. like some kind of sour drill sergeant. Great. Scanning the details, apparently, he served as the council's principal legal assessor, reviewing foreign charters and business licenses before they reached a vote on letting them into the city. He did not hold a seat on the council himself, but his recommendation carried influence. I will have to deal with this lemon-faced bastard first, huh? Do we know why? I asked, expecting that one of the families who were against our move into their city may have sent him. We aren't certain, she told me, sighing a little. He publicly opposed us just a day before they left to visit us. Ah, I groaned as my fear was reinforced. So he is coming to gather reasons to reject us. Anything useful against him? Not much, Siren said, also a bit unsure. The messages we got back were hasty, so there is not much verification to them. The strongest I marked is that his younger son owes a considerable amount to private lenders in Keldora. The remaining things are all connected to the fact that many people he turned away from the city or businesses want him dead, both local and foreign powers. That's not enough, and we can't kill him yet. I shrugged, as now we were on the back foot. We will improvise, I said as I closed the folder, but send out people to investigate his kid. That could be a good point to strike from. Who else is coming? Kravik asked. Kavosh Dalen, she answered before I could. A merchant counselor and leader of the delegation. His family controls a good chunk of the river-based transportation. As for Dalen, he wants his daughter's glassworks to receive the lighting contract for our new establishment. That should be our hook. Is her work good? Kravik asked, smiling. She hesitated, but then just shrugged. Acceptable. Then we may give it to her, if that makes it easy to get into the city. I chuckled, listening to her as she explained it to Kravik. Then there is Lady Sabine Auriel, one of the noble councillors. Her family owns the old Grand Counting Hall we want to lease and transform into the second Swan. The building Ivessa selected? Kravik asked. Are they on good terms then? Yes, they are. That's why we have this opportunity. Siren nodded. It has been mostly empty for 9 years and would cost them a fortune in repairs if they want to do anything with it. So she already pretty much agreed to all our requests, and if we renovate it and her family will receive rent from us, we have their vote. Then there is Factor Hugo Roque representing the Carters and Warehouse Guild, with another seat on the council. He wants assurances that we will hire local workers and purchase from Keldoran suppliers at all times. So far so good, no? Kravik asked, looking at me. On paper, I nodded. The last official guest is Loris Vey, a wine merchant invited by Dalen. He has no government position, but he represented several business houses interested in supplying the casino, so this will be only the first battle. And we need the middle managerial people on our side too. If we get these ones to see reason, we will have an easier time getting the last votes. Just make sure you all follow my lead, because it is going to be a long day. With that done, I decided to go and see Ivessa, who was waiting in one of the private lounges on the second floor. Currently, she wore dark red, which looked almost black in the light, with several pieces of gold jewelry decorating her neck and fingers. Her hair was pinned behind her head, and she had made sure everyone recognized her as the current leader of the Crimson Ledger by now. You look flirty, I said in greeting, chuckling to myself. Thank you for the compliment. But it won't change my mind about the 35%. I see, her smile tightened slightly. I will drop the issue then. Better be. I nodded, my smile feeling a bit colder, which resulted in her looking away, and I saw how her neck moved as she silently gulped. This won't be easy, so I hope you are ready. She recovered quickly. I would rather not leave anything to chance, and I want this handled legally. As legally as possible, I agreed, raising my hands. We can get to the illegal ways after we are in. Now, tell me again, all that you know of our guests. An hour or so later, when it was already getting dark, the delegation finally arrived in 3 enclosed carriages bearing Keldora's emblem. 2 silver keys crossed over a Y-shaped blue river. Their journey through the snow had not been pleasant, and that was evident on their faces. I watched as Councillor Kavosh Dalen got out first, wrapped in so much fur that he reminded me of the fatty. Naturally, he wasn't like that. He was quite fit, going by his face, with a trimmed beard and dark eyes. Lady Sabine followed him, and she was close to 40, pale as the snow, and visibly unimpressed by Velgrada's weather. Her silver-grey cloak was fastened with a jeweled pin shaped like a bridge, while 2 servants followed her, carrying some kind of heater or whatever that thing was. Factor Roke was the next I noticed, and he was younger than I expected, perhaps in his mid-30s, although his heavy brows and serious expression made him look much older. Remembering from the dossier, Loris Vale climbed out behind him, shivering but smiling. Magistrate Renner emerged last, of course, and he was a bit thinner than his portrait, with more grey in his hair than black. I met them all beneath the covered entrance, smiling at each of them, as they were led forward by my people. Councillor Dalen, I greeted, extending my hand one by one, shaking theirs in arriving order. Welcome to Velgrada. Mr. Auriel. He clasped it firmly at once, smiling. I hope the weather is not part of your sales presentation. Of course not, I laughed. If I controlled the weather, we would all be meeting on a pleasant warm spring day, right after a cleansing rain, enjoying the sunlight. Oh, don't tease me, please. Dalen laughed, and Lady Sabine offered me her gloved hand, which I took and kissed. Lady Auriel, it is an honor. I smiled at her, but her answer was enough to let me know she was missing the definition of good times from her repertoire. Tsk. We will decide that by the end of the visit. I hope to improve my chances before then. I kept my smile, but inside I was already wary of her disposition. Is she on her period or what? Next, Factor Roke introduced himself with little to no ceremony, leaving Magistrate Renner the final say. Mr. Auriel, he said, while I just bowed my head. Magistrate. Still, even then, I noticed how his eyes moved past me, settling briefly on Ivessa, who appeared outside in the meantime, standing a respectful distance behind me. And you must be Lady Ivessa. Simply Ivessa will do, she answered, bowing. I was told you represented the Crimson Ledger. The magistrate said with a cold smile, although we never did work together, I always kept an eye on your people when you visited our city. Was this provocation? This may not be as easy as I first expected, but oh well. I can turn this around, and if not, I have other methods I can turn to. I'm honored, she answered without flinching. But our ledger has gone through many changes, including a new leadership. There is a lot that is no longer like it was in the past. Not to mention, I'm just a guest, like you all, as the main man is standing right before you. Which we can discuss inside, I gestured toward the open doors, interrupting them both. Please, you have traveled far, and I would rather not negotiate while all of us freeze to death. I have prepared a warm welcome, and I know you all will greatly enjoy it. Please, follow me. Chapter 1. 115. The Stick. Leading them into the Swan, I made sure we were prepared, because I wanted them to see what I was offering. The main floor was very much active, despite the early hour. My dealers ran the card tables, mixing the noise of chatter with cards, the dice rolling across the table, the roulette balls clinking as they spun. All the good stuff. At the same time, musicians performed on the raised stage at the back, of course, while the hired servants moved constantly between my guests, delivering drinks without interfering with the games. I caught Dalen scanning the customers first, maybe surprised that they weren't ordinary people sitting here wasting their wages, but instead wealthy merchants and nobles dressed way better than he expected. They were people like him, which surprised the group. As for Lady Sabine, she was more interested in the tables and the slots at the side, while the others' eyes wandered between the workers. After they took it all in, I led them to a prominent table while Hadric demonstrated the card games, and Rayan explained our rules and anti-cheating measures. We showed them the marked storage boxes, the rotating dealers, and the observers positioned around the floor. Naturally, I didn't divulge every method, only those that were already well known amongst the guests, too. As we were walking, suddenly Lady Sabine had stopped near one of the decorated columns, studying the room. How much of this would be reproduced in Keldora? I can't say yet, I answered after a short pause. Not every detail, but enough to make it unique. The Keldoran branch, if we can open it, should feel like it belongs to your city, so I don't want to just copy everything. What would you preserve? She asked, smiling, and apparently the others liked the answer too. The core of what makes my swan work. As for your building, that depends, because we only heard about it, never really seen it. I answered, this time much faster. You studied the plans, she argued, making me smile. I intend to invest a great deal of money in your family's property. But as for how to shape it and rebuild it, it can only be talked about once I know I will be allowed to do it. I won't spend on it until I know I have it. Yes, I have ideas, but I am not going to speculate because making promises without consideration is a bad habit. Of course. She smiled, slowly dropping her questioning, which I suppose was a good sign. Next, I showed them one of the secure counting rooms where the day's chips were exchanged and recorded, along with the incoming profits. Dalen spent considerable time examining our bookkeeping system, and since these were the ones I shipped off to the City Lord monthly, I wasn't that worried about him taking a look. If they were accurate enough for taxes, it should be good enough for these bastards too. By the time we reached the private second-floor room we had prepared for them, the delegation had visibly warmed to the idea, and none of them looked angry about the weather anymore. Well, almost nobody, the sole exception being the sour-faced Renner. But we could work with that, so it was time to feed them. To my surprise, there were no hard questions throughout it, which wasn't what I expected. So without waiting for them to recollect their thoughts, when the dishes were cleared, Siren distributed copies of our proposal. The grand counting hall will be restored at our expense, I began speaking, holding a cup filled with wine. The Auriel family, I said while looking at Sabine, will receive the agreed rent, adjusted every 5 years, according to the agreed revenue sharing. We will employ no fewer than 100 Keldoran workers during construction and retain at least 70 local employees after opening. We are open to hire more if business supports it, but until we manage to train the staff up to our standard, the leadership will come from my people. How long that training thing is? Roke asked. Depends on the quality of the workers, I said without stopping. Also, as promised, we will purchase local food, drink, fuel, transport. Whatever is needed will be sourced in your city, except for the furniture required to operate the casino. You have none of it ready, and I can't wait a year until you adapt it. Why can't you? Magistrate Renner asked, suddenly making his voice heard, making me turn to him with a smile. Because if I have to wait a year, I can also establish branches in multiple of the other cities. I don't mind leaving Keldora to be the last. For now, it is my first target, but not the only one. It could be the last just as easily. Which we wouldn't want, Dalen said, his voice firm, throwing a dark look at the magistrate. My tables and machines are ready, they just need transportation, I continued, speaking as if nothing had happened. Now, back to the place. As promised, routine maintenance will be purchased through Keldoran suppliers whenever their prices and quality remain competitive. You saw my swan, I can't let it be anything but perfect. If it falls below my desired quality, I will bring in my own workers to restore it to what it has to be at. Competitive according to whom? Renner asked again, not letting it go. To your city. I shot back, don't think I wouldn't recognize when I'm being fleeced. Even if I agree that your city receives its above the ordinary property and trade taxes, along with a separate gaming duty, my own accounting office will send every copy back to me. I built this place to what it is in less time than you think. You may not believe me, but I know how to play the game, and I won't be pushed around. Humph, Renner snorted. You are asking to operate within Keldora while threatening us. I am being absolutely honest, I answered calmly. I already acquiesced to requests that are not even near what you give to your local businesses, and I hadn't made a fuss about it. However, I am stating this now so there won't be any confusion later. I know about it all. Not just that. There is a level I am willing to bend, but I will not go down on one knee. I have told the same thing to other delegations too. Huh. Renner leaned back in his chair. You have a poor opinion of our officials. I would call it realistic. I smiled while most of them looked at Renner, wanting him to shut up, because they now realized the amount of money on the table and wanted a piece of it. I have been dealing with Velgrada's top daily, and that includes Silverhaven. As I said, I know the game we are playing. Ivessa hid her smile behind her glass because the mention of Silverhaven made even Renner flinch. By now, I knew that it was what gave Velgrada the greatest prestige amongst the other cities. The fact that it was here made Velgrada special. Come, Dalen cleared his throat, trying to defuse the situation. So, the ownership split. 65% held by my company and 35% held by Ivessa's. No local ownership, Lady Sabine asked, her eyes flashing, even though previously she wasn't interested in buying in, only to rent the place out to us. I guess seeing it in person had changed her mind, but it was too late. You receive rent, the Keldoran businesses receive our contracts, and the city receives its taxes. No, I am not selling anything else. So no Keldoran possesses influence over the establishment itself, yet being in the ownership of a Keldoran council member. How does that work? Renner pushed on, grabbing onto something. Like this. Ha, he scoffed at me. Then it is not a Keldoran establishment, but it is a foreign operation using our roads, our workers, and our wealthy citizens to enrich Velgrada. It's plain robbery. Really? I rested my hands on the table, smiling. With respect, magistrate, if your citizens enter voluntarily, work for agreed wages, supply goods for agreed prices, and you all tax the resulting profits, I struggle to identify the theft. With the numbers you offered for me, it is me who is being robbed. You still remove wealth from the city. We introduce a reason for wealth to enter it. I shot back. Can't you see? By opening branches, I actually weaken my swan here because fewer merchants will stop by just to visit the famous gilded swan. They will have one closer to home. Are you this short-sighted? Keldora already attracts enough merchants, he said in a haughty voice, responding to my insult. And after their business is concluded, many leave. I chuckled. The swan will give them a reason to remain another night. Perhaps two. During that time, they rent rooms, purchase meals, hire carriages, and spend money throughout the district, not just in my casino. Magistrate, how did you come to your position to be so blind to the simple facts? Stop insulting me. I'm just stating the points I'm seeing, I said, keeping a smile. I see little reason for the council to grant you a special charter, he said, now clearly incensed, huffing to himself. Keldoran investors could reproduce this establishment themselves. Of course. I looked at him deeply for a moment. They could reproduce the tables, copy the cards, and mimic the decorations, even the uniforms. Right here, in Velgrada, they have attempted it 3 times. I did nothing to interfere, and all 3 failed. Then their owners were incompetent. Yes. I agreed again. Perhaps yours wouldn't be. You see, that is a gamble, and that is my business. I know when to play. So if you want to make it yourself, you will have to start from scratch and get everything second-hand. Why should we? He asked back, almost laughing. Because Marcus Veron wouldn't sell you the machines, and it's only him who can make them at the moment. You can buy them second-hand from local nobles, but be ready to pay twice as much for them as they cost new. Then you can reverse engineer them, but by the time you finish everything, I will have my branches set up in all the other cities, and once again, Keldora is coming in last. I smiled, falling silent for just a moment. Let me repeat myself. I know the game, and I bent my back to my limits already. If the council prefers, reject our proposal. Encourage local investors to construct their own gambling hall. Spend a year developing procedures we already possess, training workers we already employ, and convincing foreign visitors to trust a business with no history at all. Renner's eyes narrowed considerably. Is that a threat? Yes, I stated simply, and the room had gone quiet. I came through your front door, magistrate. I invited representatives from every relevant interest to inspect my operation, and I accepted all your less than reasonable requests. But if I get refused because you want more, that won't happen. Luckily, it is not you who make the final decision, magistrate. And, I turned towards Dalen, smiling, I expect the council to protect the taxes it collects. We always do, he answered, much friendlier than Renner was. What prevents you from using the establishment to strengthen the criminal interests your den of sin would bring into our city? The magistrate pushed on, refusing to give up. Nothing, I laughed, surprising everybody, just as nothing prevents any merchant from committing crimes. For example, I leaned forward, speaking in a much colder tone. Nothing prevents Councillor Dalen from using his river barges to smuggle contraband. Then, nothing prevents Lady Sabine from hiding fugitives in one of her estates, while also bargaining ransom for the same people with opposing forces. Let's see. As far as I know, nothing prevents Factor Roques Carters from transporting stolen property either. It didn't prevent you from overlooking them either, magistrate, because if I get to know of this, it feels hard to believe you are blind to it. Renner looked toward me, his words stuck in his throat, while everyone else was now very uncomfortable because I had just mentioned some of their dirty little secrets that they didn't think I knew about. Should I continue? I asked, looking at everyone. I have more examples if you need convincing. I think it was enough, Dalen said hurriedly, wanting to change the topic immediately. I think we can all see what an operation like this would bring to our city, especially if we can capitalize on it first, besides all the others. Except Velgrada, of course. He added with a strained smile, looking at me. I do think so. I nodded, resuming my friendly tone. Especially if you too relax a little and try out the games. My people will gift you a generous starting fund so you don't gamble away your own money. Feel free to spend mine, risk it, enjoy yourselves, I added, standing up and fixing my clothes, showing that I was done talking. Then sleep on what we talked about. When tomorrow comes and you are fresh again, we can resume this discussion with you having a much better understanding of what I'm offering. Chapter 116. The Carrot. It was well past midnight when Kravik came to find me. By then, the Swan had begun preparing for closing. There were always a few tables running until the last moment, of course, but usually by 3 or 4 in the morning, we kicked everyone out. As for me, I was back in my office on the 3rd floor, seated behind my desk with the curtains pulled open. Outside, the snow continued to fall, swirling around the lanterns, painting a magical picture that I could have watched until I fell asleep, which was delayed because I heard the door open and Kravik walking in, groaning while stretching. Well, I asked, turning around in my chair to look at him as he closed the door behind him. They had fun at least. He shrugged while he sank into the chair opposite my desk, making it creak beneath his weight. Then, before continuing, he reached across my desk for the bottle of wine sitting near my papers, so I slapped his hand away. That one is expensive, I said jokingly. You are rich. And I am only going to stay rich by stopping people from stealing my expensive stuff. I chortled, come on, give me the report, then you can have it. Tsk, you are a heartless boss, you are. He grunted, but only to hold back a laugh. You gave away a small fortune to strangers downstairs. That was an investment, I reminded him, leaning back. So is keeping me happy. My friend, I opened my arms wide, that is a recurring expense. In the end, Kravik simply grinned, grabbed the cheaper bottle next to it instead, and poured himself a drink. Start from the beginning. What did they play? Everything, more or less. They began with cards, and they stayed there longest too. That was not surprising. Usually poker and blackjack let people believe they were in control because slots were pure luck, while roulette and dice were mostly luck, and a bit of technique, but amateurs wouldn't know that. That's why even amongst my regulars, cards were what they played the most. Who played there the longest? I asked, curious which family may become my good little addict. Dalen. That's not bad. He is already on our side, so I hope Hadrik didn't fleece him immediately. Nah, Kravik said, shaking his head. He liked Hadrik's table. Started out very carefully, watching the others, asking about the rules again, even though they'd already been explained during the tour. Once he won 2 rounds, he loosened up. Then, and then? Lost everything you gave him. He laughed, taking another sip. How long did it take? I asked, smiling to myself. 3 hours. Oh, that's longer than I expected. Huh. Respectable. He did not lose it all in one place, though. He continued, making me raise my brow. After cards, he tried roulette, and he won big there, so he moved back to cards. It was then he lost most of it. Then he used what remained on the slots, just throwing it in without much care. He isn't stupid at least, and spent my gift on testing the entire business. Pretty good. That was what I thought. Kravik agreed. He kept asking how long people usually stayed at each game and which ones made us the most. He liked the feeling and looked genuinely interested and happy, but I think he has a pretty strong resistance to being actually hooked on the feeling. What about Lady Sabine? I asked, noting the rest down on paper. She played cards with Dalen first, and she didn't seem interested in winning so much as watching who else joined the table. She isn't that much into the games, but more into who it attracts. She spent more time talking than gambling, and she asked two merchants where they were from, why they visited the Swan, how often they came, and whether they would travel to Keldora for another one. That woman will be tricky to handle if you want to spread Shade's influence in Keldora. Or, I raised an eyebrow, maybe you could turn her into an agent. But that's just an idea that I had. You are the boss. Let's take it slow. I raised a hand. We don't know them well enough for that, and they don't need to know my alternative plans for spreading around their city. I know. Well, Sabine tried roulette after that, and she did well at first, then lost it all on one roll. How did she take it? Better than most when losing that much, he chuckled. She laughed and said it was easier to understand the appeal after losing. Weird, if you ask me. Nah, she didn't care about it because it was gifted money. What about Roke? Cards and almost nothing else. He spent half the night asking our dealers how much they earned, how long their shifts were, and whether they received meals or some benefits. You should have seen his face when they told him how good you take care of your people. I think he thought they were told to lie, and he may doubt how much you pay our staff. That is his problem, I snorted. With them seeing how much we earn, if I underpay my own, that's how we get traitors. My philosophy is simple. Make their lives so good, they wouldn't dream of betraying it for anything. Naturally, there will be someone one day who still does, but then we will make an example of that poor fucker. And they will have earned it. Kravik agreed, actually sneering, hating traitors more than anything after what happened to the crows. Anyway, he seemed satisfied. Kravik continued, taking another sip. He also watched how often the tables were cleaned, how the drinks arrived, and how our guards moved through the crowd. He had a bit of trouble with the latter, but by the end he could spot them, even if our men were dressed casually. He has a good eye for it. And Loris Vey? I asked. Boss, that man is a drunkard, Kravik said, his grin widening as he said it. The wine man spent half the night at the bar. We can exploit that. Of course he did. I shrugged. And if we can, we will. Put someone on it, immediately. I already did. He smiled. You see, he tried nearly everything we had, and tried convincing the servants to tell him what our guests ordered most. He was then selling his own stuff to everyone who came up to the bar, non-stop. All that money you gave out was not even gambled away, but used up for booze, and to gift to the locals so they remember his name and would order wine from him. And did they? One actually did, he answered as we both laughed. So everyone lost what I gave them. Everyone who played. He corrected me as I tilted my head, recognition flashing through my eyes. Renner. Yeah, he nodded, becoming serious. That Renner guy didn't touch a table. Not once. Not once, boss. Then, what did he do? Watched like a fucking scarecrow in the middle of a field. Boss, I think that miserable bastard is going to be a massive issue. We should just kill him. Send some drunk idiot from the lower city to ambush them on the way back home. Then while being robbed, they could accidentally off him. No. I shook my head firmly. We can't touch him, not now. That would be a dead giveaway, and if something happens to him, we would be fucked. He has to get home, intact, and start his campaign against us. We will get to him differently, but the sour lemon lover must stay unharmed. If you say so, he shrugged, continuing his explanation. The man had walked through the whole floor. Many times he just stood behind the card games, spent nearly half an hour observing the slots as if one of the machines would betray how it was working inside, or how we cheat. I am very much sure that he was looking for clues on how we swindle the guests. That sounds correct, I muttered. Well, I don't think he has X-ray vision, so I wouldn't worry about it. X what? Forget it, I waved a hand. What else? He spoke with the guards, servants, two dealers, and some of the guests, asked if anyone had been cheated, whether we lent money to people after they lost, and whether anyone had ever been forced to remain or disappear. Honestly, I had considered loans when the Swan began operating with how it is now. Then I realized that lending money inside the casino would turn entertainment into debt collection, and it would sour our name greatly. It would also give critics an easy way to call us predators. So no, we weren't doing that. I mean, not here. If people wanted to borrow money elsewhere before arriving, that was their stupidity, and Shade had ample gold to throw out, especially when it came back to me anyway. What happened to the starting fund I gave Renner? I asked. He kept it. I stared at Kravik without speaking. He kept the chips? Of course not, boss. Had them exchanged before retiring for the night and pocketed the coin. Heh. A laugh escaped me before I could stop it. You are not angry, boss? Why would I be? I shook my head. Well, you gave the money so they could experience the games. I gave them complimentary funds, and I just told them to enjoy themselves. I did not order them to gamble. Look at it as it really is, my friend. I bribed them. With that, I stood and walked toward the window, ignoring the fact that Kravik had seized the expensive wine the moment I did so. Let him have it, I said. In fact, make sure nobody mentions it tomorrow. Sure, but, Kravik said, wiping his growing beard after taking a swing, you aren't going to use it against him? For accepting hospitality money? No, that would be pathetic. But at least we know he is open to bribery. Now I know he isn't some unbending saint and that he likes money just as much as everyone else. And then I glanced back at him. Did any of the others spend their own money after losing what I gave them? No. None? They had enough restraint to stop. Dalen nearly bought another set of chips, but Sabine reminded him they were here for business, and after that they went drinking. At least they do have some restraint, I muttered, thinking. I expected you to be irritated that we only earned back all the money you gifted them. I will never expect any of my gifts to be returned, I whispered, watching the snow. Otherwise it isn't a gift, but an exchange. Well, you are the boss, boss. Heh, I chuckled, clasping my hands behind my back. We will move on to the next phase. Tomorrow we will have another meeting, and I will make my push. Either they will invite us to Keldora by the end of it, or we drop the whole thing altogether. After all the preparations, Kravik asked, almost choking on the wine. I'm not desperate, are you? I asked, looking at him over my shoulder. There are other cities we can get into, even if they don't have Ivessa's connections. If we do that, I don't even need to share anything with her either. Would it be harder to initiate? Oh, of course, but I would rather do that than keep dancing this stupid waltz with bastards like this Renner. You know, Kravik muttered, watching me, forming a small smile on his face. I never would have imagined you would turn out like this when we met in Korvar. Me neither, I answered, turning back towards him, raising my cup so he could pour me some of the fine wine before he drank it all. But our experiences do shape us, wouldn't you agree? Yeah, that is an absolute truth, boss. He nodded, absent-mindedly touching his eye patch. And you know, I guess I'm happy it turned out this way. Me too, Kravik, me too. Chapter 1, 117, Push. Breakfast was served in one of the second-floor private rooms the following day. The sky remained grey, and snow kept coming down in thick clumps. Once again, our guests arrived one by one, and Dalen looked tired but cheerful. As for Lady Sabine, she was perfectly composed, while Roke carried a small notebook filled with his observations, I guess. Vey, naturally, looked like someone with a heavy hangover, while Renner was looking the same as the day before. In the end, I made them wait a little, arriving last and smiling at them as I took my place at the head of the table. Good morning, I said. I hope everyone slept well. The beds were excellent, Dalen answered, and although I knew he was overpraising our hospitality, I let it happen to counterbalance Renner's attitude from yesterday. The wine was better, Vey added, rubbing his forehead with a smile. I will make sure the local suppliers will hear about your praise. I nodded back at him. Then, just as I was saying something else, Renner began speaking before the servants had finished setting down the food. I remain unconvinced. Of course, I said simply, leisurely buttering a piece of bread. Also, good morning to you too, Magistrate. The entertainment you put up for us was polished, he continued, ignoring me. But that fakery does not address the legal and moral issues surrounding your establishment and the filth you want to bring into our city. Dalen exhaled through his nose, slowly losing his temper. Must we begin immediately? We came here for a purpose, Renner answered without looking at him. Yes, Sabine said, to determine whether the Gilded Swan would benefit Keldora. And I believe it would not. Magistrate, Roke opened his notebook at those words. With respect, all the numbers and I myself disagree. That made Renner turn toward him, feeling that suddenly everyone was against him, which I found super amusing. The establishment employs more workers than I expected. Roke continued plainly. Servants, cooks, cleaners, musicians, clerks, maintenance workers, coachmen, stable hands, and suppliers. We expected their crooked dealers and guards, but with this wide of a portfolio, you can see how much it can mean. Mr. Auriel. He looked toward me, and for a moment I was surprised by the way he called me. You currently employ how many people? Not just in here, at the Swan, but altogether. 212, I answered. More if we include temporary work and outside contracts, like the people shoveling the snow. Impressive, Roke said, nodding and writing the number down. A Keldoran branch would begin smaller, he said, mostly to the others, but even half that number would be significant. Employment does not erase the harm caused by gambling. Renner argued the same point once again. Do we know how much he pays them? They could be slaves, in endless servitude to them for losing their life savings. Are we going to keep inventing false narratives, I said, taking a bite of bread, or are we ready to speak facts? You saw my clientele, magistrate. They are not people who can't take the risk of losing their gold. His eyes narrowed. I'll take the silence as an agreement. Plus, I hear that people already gamble in Keldora, I continued. They do it in taverns, just like before. The difference is that those games are unregulated, untaxed, and more likely to be manipulated. They do prey on the weak, I agree. Thus, if we move in, we would be more than happy to have you clean them up from your streets and regulate gambling. With your input, he sneered, looking at me, but I just smiled back at him, so Dalen raised a hand before Renner could become even angrier. Magistrate, a chartered establishment gives the council something it can inspect and tax, unlike those dens we have now. Mr. Auriel is right, the city needs a cleaning, and we agree on that part, are we not? And then let in a foreign criminal organization, do something that the likes of him can exploit, Renner replied. And who are we going to deal with in the future? Ourselves? Dalen asked, raising his voice in the end. Aren't we trading with your so-called foreigners? Damn it! The guests we spoke with last night were not all residents of Velgrada. Listen to what you say, you dog. What did you call me? The magistrate asked, but Dalen, who was a council member, was having none of it. You are a dog, barking for the others. He said coldly, You think you are on the council? Is that what you tell yourself? I have been enduring your insolence, peasant, but keep it up, and I will put you down myself. Ho. Lay. Shait. Someone blew a fuse. I almost laughed, but luckily I could hide it behind my breakfast. This was great. So the situation is like a powder keg, eh? Perfect. Just what I need, actually. My apologies, Dalen looked towards me, and I just waved a hand, showing it was nothing. Let me ask, Mr. Auriel, how many of your visitors are outside of the city? I swallowed, reaching for my cup. On an ordinary week, approximately 1/3, during major events, when we hold them, nearly half. And if Keldora had its own swan? Roke asked, licking his lips. I can only give you partial guesses, I warned him, but I think you would attract visitors passing through the river routes the most, or from the merchants waiting for cargo. All the wealthy travelers, adventurers, and people from nearby settlements could come and visit, especially if we advertise it well. The name of my swan alone will be a boost and guarantor in this case, giving it ample legitimacy. You are taking big risks with it, Renner spoke again, but this time he wasn't shouted at. I already said this yesterday, I said, looking at him only with one eye, not turning my head. Opening in Keldora will take business from this swan. I know that. I would rather own 2 establishments that divide the customers than one establishment while someone else opens the second. That way, I still keep my profits rather than outright losing them. A proper forward-thinking position, Sabine nodded, appreciating the honesty. Well, money would be there to be made, that is for sure, Vey said, who had been drinking water instead of wine for once, leaning forward. The amount of drink sold here in one evening was extraordinary. On that alone we would have a killing. You, Renner looked at him with disbelief. That is your contribution? I represent suppliers. What did you expect me to study, the beds? He chuckled. A Keldoran branch would require large and consistent purchases. Wines, spirits, ales, fruit, spices, all from the top shelves. Okay, not merely expensive labels either, or we won't turn a profit. And seeing that your ordinary tables consumed more local drink than I expected shows that there is a place where we could make a killing. You have all become distracted by prospective profit, Renner spoke up again, not towards me, but towards the others. None of this addresses the question of foreign control. Are we so weak that someone, no offense, Mr. Auriel, Lady Sabine placed her cup down while speaking, that someone without any voice in our city would threaten our control? For starters, did you miss the fact that the building would remain my family's property? The operation would not be yours. Renner pushed on, and I was surprised he did. Someone either bought him big time, or has something on him that made him into a proper guard dog. We would be foolish to reject it merely because Mr. Auriel is not from our city or that he earns money. I will file my objections, Renner said simply, realizing the fight was lost here and he could only protest against it back in Keldora. I would be disappointed if you didn't, I said, making him snort, while the other only smiled, trying to pacify the atmosphere. Mr. Auriel, his eyes moved toward me, making the way he addressed me sound foul. You find this amusing? A little, I smiled. I would have taken you more seriously if you had been reasonable, but you just started shooting accusation after accusation without proof. It made me realize what I should expect from the ones holding your leash, and I'm not impressed. They are throwing their shares away. Oh well, more will fall onto the plate of those who can see what I'm offering. I added, leaning back, looking directly at the magistrate. Just don't come crying to me when you are starting to go hungry, magistrate. The delegation remained in Velgrada for another 3 days, and most of that time was much less dramatic. Siren worked with Dalen to detail the expected revenue, employment numbers, and the forming taxation structure. Lady Sabine spent hours reviewing preliminary plans for the Grand Counting Hall, although I continued refusing to promise a final design before seeing it myself. On the other hand, Roke met with our managers, staff, and maintenance workers. He produced lists of what Keldoran suppliers could provide and which goods would still need to come from Velgrada. It was also where Ivessa had become the key figure, because her people discussed transportation, storage, and security for the caravans that would go between the cities. The ledger had warehouses and established commercial partners. Naturally, Renner attended almost every discussion here, and then he questioned a vague sentence, or challenged an unusual clause, and demanded explanations for matters nobody else cared about. It was irritating, but in a way it was also useful. By the second day, he had identified 3 sections of the draft charter that could have caused problems later. I mean, problems for me. One of those involved the definition of internal security, and I realized Ivessa had appointed mostly her people to it. Crafty, it almost went unnoticed by us, which resulted in me scolding my people. How the hell did that almost happen? Another such point concerned the exchange of swan chips for Federation currency, which had to be fixed and leveled with Velgrada's currency. It wasn't a hard thing to do, but still allowed the Keldorans to nudge the numbers to their advantage. The third involved responsibility for crimes committed by guests inside private rooms, almost forcing me to always pay reparations if the new swan would be damaged. I think the Keldorans hated him more after those moments. Heh. On the morning of the 4th day, their carriages were prepared outside, and the snowfall had finally weakened a little, although the city remained buried. Our workers cleared the road before the entrance once again, while servants loaded the delegation's luggage. I myself stood beneath the covered entrance with Ivessa and my people, as Dalen clasped my hand. We will present our findings to the council. And, I smiled while asking, and I believe there is enough support to continue. Once we return, we will prepare a formal invitation. To Keldora? I asked, raising a brow. Yes, Sabine said, smiling like a fox. You will be allowed to inspect the Grand Counting Hall, meet the remaining councillors, and present a finalized proposal. I advise you, ahead of time, to bring someone who understands construction. I will bring Marcus Varen, I said simply, but they had no idea who he was, besides the one who also made my gambling machines. Soon enough, they all left, and the carriage doors closed one after another. Drivers cracked their reins, and the horses began pulling the delegation away through the narrow path cut into the snow. So? Ivessa crossed her arms, throwing me a look. So what? Did we win? Not yet, I chuckled. You heard them. They want us in their city. Are we really going, boss? Kravik asked, shivering a little. If they invite us, yeah, I nodded, finally turning around and heading in. Don't get paranoid on me now, I added, patting his shoulder. I don't think they would try to kill us. Well, Kravik groaned, I wasn't thinking of it. Right until now. Chapter 118, Return. Several days had passed since the Keldoran delegation left Velgrada, and now I was doing nothing but waiting for their invitation. I could take it a bit more leisurely, I guess. However, that didn't mean I intended to sit around doing nothing until it arrived, and that's why I was having a meeting at the moment. You're coming with me? Auriel, Marcus sighed as he stared at me from the other side of the table. Why do I sense that it wasn't a question? Because it wasn't, I said with a smile. I see. He shrugged as he slowly lowered the cup he had been drinking from, placing it onto the small plate before him, reaching for a cheese stick. We were seated in one of the Swan's private second-floor rooms, overlooking the main floor through a wide, one-sided interior window. Naturally, below us, the casino was operating at its usual pace, which meant it was crowded. The weather had improved slightly since the Keldorans departed, but that only meant that the snow had stopped falling for a few days. The cold was just as vicious, so walking outside was not really what anyone had in mind, holing up either back home or in my Swan. Marcus himself had arrived half an hour earlier, bundled in a thick coat, coming only because I had invited him. His own honor didn't let him skip my call because thanks to our cooperation, their warehouses were full and their trade routes were bountiful. Currently, they were on a meteoric rise, and soon they would be able to start competing with the ledger. Especially if I get to drag him with me on this expedition. You don't even have the invitation yet, he chuckled. Are you this sure about it? Yep, when it arrives, I don't want to spend 3 days listening to you explain why you are too busy, so let's get things out of the way, okay? I am busy, he said, shrugging and shaking his head again. Auriel, I have multiple shipments waiting to be sorted, 3 workshops working on orders from nobles, and a damn dispute with a supplier who raised the price for his timber to twice what it was worth last month. Like he sells firewood, the bastard. His wood is not for the fireplace, and he knows it too. Fire him. He is not my employee, he snorted, holding back a laugh. Stop buying from him. Auriel, he pinched the ridge of his nose. That man controls almost a quarter of the quality hardwood entering Velgrada. He has the rights to the forests around the city for 2 generations now. Your tables were made of his material. Buy his entire operation. Marcus looked at me for a long moment before exhaling again. You make everything sound so very easy. I envy that. It usually is that easy, I said, being serious. Buy him out, take over the whole operation, internalize it, and then you won't have these issues and raise your own profit margin as an added bonus. In-house production is the way. And where exactly would I find the money to buy a quarter of Velgrada's timber trade? Where else? I gestured around us while Marcus followed the motion, looking through the window at the packed casino below. I'm not asking you for money, he said quickly. I already owe you a lot. I know, I smiled. I'm simply reminding you that we can arrange it if the opportunity is good. That is precisely how I ended up involved in all of this, he muttered, reaching for another cheese stick. Oh, come on, I joked, raising my own cup. You say that like you're suffering. I am suffering. From success. His eyes wandered toward one of the slot machines below, hiding a laugh. I followed his gaze, watching as a wealthy woman was feeding coins into it, while two of her friends shouted suggestions despite having no control over the result. They just kept pulling the lever over and over again. But then the machine rang, spewing out a handful of coins that they immediately inserted back into it. "Fine, I am suffering from your success," he said at last, tearing his eyes away. "You're welcome. So, Keldora," he leaned back in his chair, "you want me there because you already promised them I would come." "Yes, because I can't just bring you without prior notice. That just gives them ample reasons to start complaining." "Still, even if I dropped your name, they don't know you well enough," I smiled as I explained. "That's why I want you there. If they see someone they don't really know, they will focus on you more, and I can slip things past them." His eyes narrowed at that. "Auriel, you are a bastard, you know that. This is a cutthroat business." I shrugged and leaned forward. "Look, you can be irritated after you hear what is on the table." "I'm just worried, not irritated," he said quickly, raising his hands. "The building they want us to use is called the Grand Counting Hall." I continued without stopping. "It once housed merchant courts, auction chambers, offices, and storage areas. Maybe it even has some hidden smuggling holes. Or, secret entrances like our underground facility you helped me build. It has been mostly empty for 9 years, and I need your eyes to give me a proper value and how much it would be to refit. And to find those possible hidden spots, the last thing I need is a back door I don't know about. The way you are telling me, I get the feeling that the whole building is falling apart." Lady Sabine hinted that the plans make it look better than it is, so I expect a total dump, yes. "So it is absolutely falling apart. Fuck." "Probably," I chortled, reaching for a cheese stick too. Munching on his own, Marcus looked through the window again. The original Gilded Swan was also a pigsty, so it shouldn't be much worse. And look at it now. It was one of the most fabulous businesses in Velgrada. The fact that Marcus had helped turn it into that was precisely why I needed him. "You know this place," I said, breaking the silence. "I trust you, Marcus. I really do. You know where we wasted money, where we cut too many corners, so you have the experience. I need that experience in a foreign city the most." He looked at me seriously, and I could see he was relieved and elevated to hear that, but said nothing in the end. "Anyway," I continued before he could start getting mopey around me, "I need someone I trust to inspect it. Plus," I stopped, as it was time to throw in the true bait. "Keldora is an untapped market for Varen and Sons." "That's true." Marcus's expression changed slightly, gulping. "You would be presented as the exclusive manufacturer behind the Gilded Swan. Goods flow through that city from multiple others and their kingdoms. Every merchant house there maintains contacts somewhere else. If the second Swan opens, every piece of specialized furniture and every machine inside it will carry your craftsmanship, your logo, and your name. You have to be there ahead of time to put a face to the name, my friend." "Setting up a foreign branch is not simple," he said at once, but I saw his eyes move. He was already sold on the idea. "Afraid of some difficulties?" I smiled, but in the end he just shook his head. The opportunity was obvious. Varen and Sons had influence within Velgrada, but outside of it, they were simply another trading company. A successful foreign contract could change that, because having the link to the fatty, who was also more talk than action, was not enough. If I expanded, they expanded, and that was how good partnerships worked. At least, that was how they were supposed to work. My experiences in my old life had shown me that most people preferred taking everything they could and acting surprised when the other side stopped cooperating and started backstabbing them. Naturally, that could still happen, so I was doing my best to balance the sheets, just like I was doing with Ivessa. "This is not just about the Swan," I said. "You will be able to establish connections independent of me. Suppliers, craftsmen, transporters, investors, you name it. Whatever deals you make for Varen and Sons are yours. I'm not butting into it." His eyes flicked toward me. "No percentage? I heard about your deals with Ivessa. Don't mix them into this. I am not taking your shares unless the deal involves one of my businesses." "Who else is going?" he asked. "Me, Kravik, probably Siren, Rian with a few guards, and Ivessa." "Ah." His face immediately tightened. Ivessa. Although Marcus worked with Ivessa when necessary, I knew he didn't like her, not one bit. I am not asking you to like her, I said at once. I'm asking you to sit in the same carriage without trying to throw her into the snow. I would wait until we reached a bridge. He joked, making me roll my eyes, but I knew he wouldn't dare to curse her out. I assume you expect Veron and Sons to cover its own travel expenses. No, I shook my head. It's all on me, as I am asking you to come. Wait, now you are asking. He looked at me with raised brows. You know what I meant? Yeah, he shrugged. Sure. You see? I smiled. You wanted to come all along, and I knew it. I wanted to be asked. He pouted like a kid, while I just waved a hand at him. Details. You are not a woman to be coerced into it, are you? You are an insufferable little bastard, he answered, making me laugh, but then my chuckle got stuck in my throat when I saw the casino entrance open and everything inside me stopped. The one who entered. She wore a thick brown winter cloak made from, I don't know, things. It was dirty, covered in slush, ash, and several colors that probably came from crushed ingredients. Snow was melting across her shoulders and within her hair, which had grown longer and was tied back carelessly with a plain strip of cloth. Her face looked thinner, very exhausted, with shadows beneath her eyes, and the skin around her fingers looked slightly stained, even from where I was. I noticed a tiny burn mark near one thumb and another line across the back of her wrist when she got her gloves off, carrying a heavy satchel over one shoulder and holding a wooden case against her chest. Naturally, I left Veron where he was, without saying anything. I was soon running down the stairs, jumping the last few steps, while the people inside were wondering who let a beggar in, grimacing at her. They only did that until I literally crashed into the bar pole from above, pushing myself off and skidding to a halt right before her. Hi, Lyra said, suddenly blushing, being a bit insecure about herself all of a sudden. I noticed she held back a lot and was unsure what to say, probably conscious of how much longer her absence was than it was supposed to be. Of course, I caught her before she could think too much, and by reflex, she dropped everything and her arms wrapped around my neck. Without thinking anymore, she buried her face against my shoulder, holding on so tightly that her fingers tangled in the back of my coat. I could feel her trembling, but I didn't know whether it came from the cold or something else. Bah! It did not matter. Not anymore. Welcome home, I whispered. I missed you, she muttered as her voice broke, already sobbing. I missed you too, I answered honestly, then I pulled away just so I could kiss her. There was no thought behind it. Let everyone watch the show. Lyra froze for only a fraction of a second, but then she kissed me back, and her hands moved from behind my neck to the sides of my face, pulling me closer, not wanting to stop either. When we finally separated, neither of us went far, and our foreheads remained pressed together while she took a shaky breath. You look a bit different, she whispered. So do you. I laughed. Oh, yeah. Is that bad? It is, making you look older. And you are stinky, I said, as I moved my hands to her face, gently turning her head toward the light. You do need a bath. Ha. She blushed. Why are you being so honest? Bully. I still like you like this, I said, then turned a bit more serious. What did he do to you? She blinked, watching me examine her face, then the injuries on her hands. Brannick, you look like you haven't slept since I left you with the fucker. Not to mention, what are these? Burn marks? Cuts? Blisters? Didn't he have any protective gloves? I will flay his skin and cut off his fingers. Handling ingredients is not easy, Auriel, and I didn't sleep well. She muttered, avoiding my eyes. Lyra. It's fine. I am going to kill him. No, you're not, she protested surprisingly strongly. He is brilliant, and he taught me for free. Don't you dare. He also apparently worked you until you became a ghost. I snorted. Maybe I will just break his arms. I am not a ghost, and stop it. She huffed as she pinched my cheek. Don't hurt him, he is eccentric, but he is a good man. Ha. I exhaled, holding her hand. Come. Let's get you a good bath, and then something proper to eat. Then we can talk about what happened. Naturally, she had no arguments, and looking around, she got really conscious about everyone looking at us and no longer paying any games. My wife is back, I said out loud, making Lyra jump and turn tomato red. The drinks are on the house for the next hour. With that, all the glares turned into smiles and applause, making Lyra want to hide inside of my clothes, being the one to pull me away. But I couldn't help myself and just grinned like an idiot.